The alien princess despised humans, until one won her heart on the battlefield HFY Stories. Best HFY stories in the vast and dangerous outer frontier, humanity was carving its way through the stars. The planets they settled were far from peaceful, but there was something about the rough, unclaimed lands that called to them. Yet, this was not a land meant for humans alone. The Kylor, a fierce alien race, had claimed the very same space centuries ago. They saw themselves as the true rulers of these planets, and they hated the humans for daring to settle in their territory. Princess Alyssera, the youngest of the Kylor royal family, was born into this hatred. The Kylor had always been at war with other species, and humanity's arrival in their domain only worsened the situation. Alyssera was trained to fight since she could remember. Her sharp instincts, combined with advanced Kylor technology, made her a deadly warrior. She was the embodiment of the Kylor pride, strong, ruthless, and loyal only to her people. She had little patience for humans, seeing them as weak and insignificant. Their colony spread like a virus, building cities on the very planets the Kylor had once called home. Alyssera's mission was simple: protect her people and reclaim what was rightfully theirs. She had never met a human she could respect, until now. Alyssera's ship drifted into the atmosphere of one of the newest human settlements. The planet was rich with resources, and the Kylor would stop at nothing to take it back. As her ship landed, her warriors disembarked, ready for battle. The humans were outnumbered, but that didn't seem to matter. They fought fiercely, refusing to surrender. Alyssera admired their courage, though she did not show it. Courage was pointless without strength. The Kylor had both. The battle began, as Alyssera had expected. Humans fought valiantly, but their weapons were no match for the advanced Kylor technology. Alyssera stood at the front of her army, leading them through the chaos. Her glowing blue armor reflected the red glow of the planet's twin suns. She moved like a shadow, swift and deadly, cutting down anyone who dared to stand in her path. The humans were strong, but they could not match her speed. Then, in the middle of the battle, Alyssera saw him. He was different from the others. A human soldier, dressed in simple cowboy-style clothing, stood tall in the midst of the battle, a rifle slung across his back. He moved with the same grace and focus as the Kylor, his eyes sharp as he scanned the battlefield. Unlike the others, he did not seem afraid. Alyssera's gaze followed him as he led a small group of human soldiers to hold a key position. They fought with a fierce determination, taking down Kylor warriors one by one. She was impressed. This human was not like the others. He was different. Her curiosity only grew when he locked eyes with her across the battlefield. A brief moment passed, but it was enough for her to notice something strange in his expression. It wasn't fear or hatred as she had expected, but something more calculated. This human, for a brief instant, seemed almost confident. Alyssera narrowed her eyes. This was the kind of human she had never expected to find. A warrior who didn't fear her. A warrior who might be worthy of respect. But that respect would not come easily. As the battle raged on, Alyssera's thoughts remained on the human warrior. There was something about him that made her hesitate. She had fought humans before, countless times, but this man was different. She didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the way he moved or the fire in his eyes, but for the first time in her life, Alyssera wondered if there might be more to humans than she had been taught to believe. But she would not show weakness. She would defeat them, as she had defeated all others. It was her destiny. Suddenly, the sound of a loud explosion shook the ground beneath her feet. The battle paused as both sides looked toward the source of the blast. A large fortified building had been hit, and it was starting to collapse. The ground trembled as debris fell from the sky, and panic spread among the human soldiers. Alyssera's sharp senses picked up movement. A small group of humans had broken off from the chaos, and they were running toward the fallen building. The human warrior she had noticed earlier was at the front, leading the charge. There was no hesitation in his steps. He was going to save them, even if it meant risking his life. She watched, torn between her duty to her people and a strange curiosity about this human warrior. The Kylor had no place for weakness. Her people did not show mercy. But as she watched him, something inside her stirred. The human warriors reached the building just as it started to collapse, and Alyssera saw something she had never seen before in a human. Selflessness. They were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the people trapped inside the wreckage. For a moment, Alyssera could see no difference between the Kylor and these humans. They both fought for the ones they cared about. Alyssera was about to turn away when suddenly a blast of energy struck the ground near her. She was thrown to the ground, stunned but unharmed. She looked up to see the human warrior standing before her, holding out his hand to help her up. The gesture was simple, but it caught her completely off guard. She didn't take his hand. "You're lucky," he said, his voice low but clear. "You'll have to do better than that to take me down." Alisara stood, brushing the dust from her armor. She was not used to hearing such words from a human, especially one who had just helped her. Her pride was sharp, but so was her curiosity. "I will not be saved," she said, her voice cold. The human warrior simply nodded. Wouldn't expect anything less. In that brief exchange, Alisara saw something that unsettled her, a spark of respect. She would not admit it, not even to herself, but for the first time in her life she was questioning everything she had been taught about humans. Maybe they weren't all weak. Maybe this one wasn't. The battle was far from over. The loud sounds of laser fire, explosions, and the cries of soldiers echoed through the dust-filled air. The Kalor forces were relentless, but the humans, led by Sully Granger, fought with a strength and stubbornness that made them hard to ignore. Alisara, the Kalor princess, had never seen anything like it. The humans were outmatched, yet they held their ground, refusing to be pushed back. Alisara stood on the edge of the battlefield, observing with a sharp gaze. Her warriors moved like machines, striking down the enemy without hesitation. But something had changed. The humans, led by the cowboy soldier she had seen earlier, were beginning to fight back with a ferocity that surprised her. They weren't afraid, and that unsettled her. As the battle wore on, the sky above darkened with the heavy smoke of burning wreckage. The ground was littered with the debris of war, bodies of soldiers from both sides strewn across the planet's red soil. Alisara, as the leader of the Kalor, felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She was trained to be strong, to lead with honor, but she also knew that war was inevitable. The Kalor had fought for centuries, and this was just another battle. Yet, despite the Kalor's superiority, the humans had something the Kalor didn't: determination. And that was the one thing Alisara couldn't ignore. Sully Granger, the human soldier, continued to lead his team with a calm, collected focus. He didn't flinch as his soldiers fell around him. He didn't hesitate as he fired back at the Kalor forces, always thinking ahead. His eyes, as sharp as ever, seemed to track every movement on the battlefield. He was everywhere, commanding his troops with skill and confidence. Alisara had never seen a human like him. As the battle reached its peak, an unexpected threat arrived from an outside force. A massive ship, the size of a city, descended from the sky, casting a shadow over the battlefield. The Kalor and humans alike paused for a moment, stunned by the sheer size of the ship. "Get ready," Alisara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Kalor warriors quickly regrouped, readying themselves for the unknown enemy. The ship's hatch opened, revealing a terrifying sight. A new alien faction, one that neither the Kalor nor humans had expected, emerged. Their dark armor and vicious weapons made them look like a force of pure destruction. They didn't care about the Kalor or the humans. They were here for one thing only: to conquer and destroy everyone in their path. Alisara's eyes narrowed as the new threat began to advance. The Kalor had always been the top force in the galaxy, and they had no intention of losing that status now. But the humans, still fighting fiercely, had something the Kalor didn't: unity. The two factions, Kalor and human, had always fought against each other, but now they were faced with a common enemy. The question was, could they put their differences aside long enough to survive? Sully Granger saw the new enemy before anyone else. He wasted no time. "We have to work together," he shouted, his voice booming across the battlefield. "If we don't, we're all dead." Alisara didn't hesitate. The Kalor were not known for alliances, but survival was more important than pride. "All warriors, fall back," she commanded. "Protect the humans." For the first time, Alisara fought alongside the humans. The Kalor and humans, once bitter enemies, now formed an uneasy alliance. They fought back-to-back, side by side, their weapons flashing in the smoke-filled air. Sully and Alisara locked eyes in the midst of the chaos. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze around them. The human soldier, so different from the others, had been right. This was no longer a battle of humans versus Kalor. It was a battle for survival. As the two factions fought together, Alisara noticed something new. The humans, led by Sully, didn't run, didn't retreat. They fought with everything they had, not for themselves but for each other. The Kalor warriors, who were trained for years to follow orders without question, couldn't help but feel a strange respect for the humans. Sully's quick thinking had kept him alive. His instincts were sharp, and he made split-second decisions that saved countless lives. Alisara had never seen anything like it. He didn't fight for glory or honor. He fought for survival, for his people, and for the greater good. As the hours passed, the tide of the battle began to shift. The new alien faction was strong, but the combined force of the Kalor and humans was stronger. The enemies started to retreat, their numbers dwindling as the Kalor and humans pushed forward. Alisara could see it in the eyes of her warriors. The same determination she had seen in Sully's eyes earlier. It was the kind of fire that could burn through anything. With a final push, the Kalor and humans broke through the enemy's lines. The battle was won, but the cost was high. Many soldiers, both Kalor and human, lay on the ground, injured or worse. Alisara walked across the battlefield, her steps heavy with the weight of what had just happened. She had fought beside humans, something she never thought would happen. She had respected a human, a feeling that was almost foreign to her. Sully, covered in dirt and sweat, stood nearby, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was surveying the battlefield, his expression unreadable. When Alisara approached, he gave her a small nod. It wasn't a victory cheer, but there was something in that nod, a shared understanding, a respect that had been earned. "You did well," Alisara said, her voice low. Sully met her gaze, his eyes intense. "We did what we had to do. That's all." Alisara wasn't sure what she expected, but the simplicity of his words caught her off guard. It was true, she realized. They had fought because they had no other choice. But that didn't mean it hadn't meant something. She had seen the humans as weak, but now she saw them for what they truly were, survivors.
"The fighters. You're not like the others," Alisara said quietly.
"Not like the humans I've known." Sully looked at her, his face hard but sincere. "You're not what I expected either. I thought the Kalor were all about power, no room for anything else." "There's more to us than power," Alisara said. "I am learning that." They stood there for a long moment, the weight of the battle pressing down on both of them. The sound of the wind was the only thing that filled the silence. Then, with a slight nod, Sully turned and walked away. Alisara watched him leave, her mind racing. The humans, the warriors she had once despised, had shown her something new. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but she knew this battle had changed something inside her. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Both Kalor and human forces had won, but the price had been high. The enemy alien faction had been pushed back, but not without causing heavy casualties. The planet, once beautiful and untouched, now lay in ruins. Smoke filled the air, and the ground was littered with debris and fallen soldiers from both sides. Alisara, the Kalor princess, stood at the center of the battlefield, looking at the chaos around her. Her blue armor, once shining, was now covered in the dust and blood of the conflict. She had seen countless battles, but there was something different about this one. The humans led by Sully Granger had fought with an intensity and purpose that she had never expected. She could still see his face in her mind, the calm, determined expression that never wavered, even in the heat of battle. Sully Granger had shown her that not all humans were weak, not all humans were the same. He had earned her respect, something she had never thought possible. As the Kalor and human forces regrouped, there was an uneasy silence. They had worked together to survive, but that didn't mean the hatred between their species had vanished. Alisara knew that the alliance was fragile. Once the enemy was defeated, the humans would go back to their own colonies, and the Kalor would return to their homeworlds. The truce would end, and the battle for power would continue. But something inside Alisara had changed. She couldn't explain it, but she felt different. She felt something she had never felt before. Respect. Not just for Sully, but for the humans as a whole. They had shown strength, resilience, and loyalty in a way that she had never thought possible. And for the first time, Alisara wondered if there could be a way to build something more than just war between their people. Sully approached her, his face tired but resolute. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the world around them seemed to disappear. There was no battle, no enemies, no soldiers. Just the two of them standing in the ruins, sharing a silent understanding. Alisara took a deep breath. "You fought well, Sully Granger," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "Better than I expected." Sully gave a small, tired smile. "You weren't so bad yourself," he replied, his voice gruff but with a hint of respect. For a moment neither of them spoke. The sounds of the battlefield faded into the background, and all that remained was the weight of their shared experience. Alisara had always believed that the Kalor were the strongest, the most honorable. But in that moment she realized that strength didn't always come from power or weapons. Sometimes it came from the heart. "I didn't think I'd ever say this, but..." Sully paused, glancing around at the destruction. "Maybe it's time we started thinking about something other than fighting. Alisara's gaze hardened, but she didn't look away. You think we can just forget all the years of war? That we can suddenly work together? You don't understand what the Kalor have been through, what they've lost. Sully's expression softened. I don't pretend to know everything about your people, but I know that we can't keep going on like this. Fighting, killing, for what? What's the point if we're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again? Alisara's mind raced. She had always been taught that the Kalor were the rightful rulers of the galaxy, that they were the strongest and the most deserving of power. She had always believed that humans were weak and insignificant, but now, after everything she had seen, she wasn't so sure. There was something about Sully, something in the way he fought, in the way he spoke, that made her question everything she had been taught. You're asking for peace, Alisara said, her voice quiet, but peace isn't so simple. There are too many who want power, too many who would see us all dead before they would let go of their control. Sully nodded. I know, but maybe that's why we have to try. We can't just keep fighting forever. Alisara looked away, her eyes searching the horizon. The battle was over, but the future was uncertain. She had always known her duty to her people, but now she wasn't so sure what that duty was anymore. Was it really about conquering, about maintaining power, or was there another way? I'll speak with my people, Alisara said after a long pause, but I can't promise anything. The Kalor have their own way of doing things. They don't trust easily, especially not after everything that's happened. Sully's eyes softened. I understand. But, maybe it's time to start changing things. Alisara turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. Maybe. The days that followed were filled with tense negotiations. The Kalor and the humans continued to work together, but the air was thick with distrust. The Kalor had always seen humans as an inferior race, and many of the Kalor warriors were unwilling to accept the idea of cooperation. But there were some Alisara's closest advisors who saw the potential in what Sully had said. They, too, had witnessed the strength of the humans. Alisara spent hours speaking with her council, trying to understand the best course of action. There were many who insisted that the Kalor should not back down, that they should return to their traditional ways of dominance. But there were others who believed in the possibility of change. Alisara found herself torn between the two sides, unsure of which path to take. Meanwhile, Sully and his soldiers had returned to their own camps, though they continued to offer assistance to the Kalor. The humans were eager to rebuild, to help heal the wounds of the battle. It was clear to Alisara that even though the humans had the opportunity to walk away, they had chosen to stay. They had chosen to help, not just because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that, more than anything, made her question her own beliefs. One evening, after a long day of talks, Alisara found herself alone outside her quarters. She walked through the camp, the soft glow of the campfires casting shadows on the faces of soldiers from both sides. She was tired, worn from the pressure of leadership, but there was a sense of resolve within her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she was willing to try something new. Sully appeared beside her, his face drawn but calm. You think it'll work? He asked, his voice quiet. Alisara paused, looking up at the stars. I don't know, she said. But I'm willing to try. Sully smiled, a hint of relief in his eyes. That's all we can do. The two of them stood together in the quiet, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. But they also knew that together they might have a chance to build something better, a future where both the Kalor and humans could survive, not as enemies but as allies. For the first time in her life, Alisara wasn't sure where the future would take her. But as she looked at Sully, she knew one thing for certain. The war wasn't over, but it had changed them both. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start something new. The days following the uneasy alliance between the Kalor and humans were filled with tension, but also a strange sense of hope. The battle had ended, but the real challenge had just begun. Both sides had returned to their respective camps, and while the fighting was over, the future remained uncertain. The Kalor and humans were still enemies by nature, and even the best of alliances could fall apart if not handled carefully. Alisara found herself pacing in her quarters late one evening, her mind racing with the events that had unfolded. She had never expected to form an alliance with humans, much less with one of them earning her respect. The human warrior, Sully Granger, had shown her that things could be different, that perhaps their people could find a way to work together, despite their differences. Yet the reality of the situation weighed heavily on her. The Kalor had always been a proud people, and many of her warriors resented the idea of cooperation with humans. They had fought for centuries to maintain their power, and they weren't about to give it up easily. Alisara's role as their leader was to uphold their honor, but she had begun to question whether there was more to leadership than strength and control. It was then that a messenger arrived, breathing heavily and clearly distressed. "Princess Alisara," he said, bowing low. "A new threat approaches. We've detected enemy ships on the horizon. They're larger than any we've faced before. If they are who we think they are, this will be a battle like no other." Alisara's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped the war was finally over, but it seemed that her hope had been misplaced. This new enemy, whoever they were, was here to destroy everything they had fought for. "Gather the troops," Alisara commanded, her voice cold and steady. "Prepare for battle. But this time, we will fight together, not just as enemies of the Kalor and humans, but as allies. Let them see what we can accomplish when we unite." As the Kalor and human forces gathered at the battlefront, Alisara couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The enemy ships loomed in the distance, dark and menacing, casting an ominous shadow over the planet. She had fought many battles, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, and the consequences of failure would be devastating for both sides. Sully Granger stood beside her, his weathered face showing signs of fatigue, but his eyes were sharp, focused. He had seen his fair share of battles, but this one felt different to him as well. There was a unity between the Kalor and humans that he had never expected, and it was giving him hope. "We don't know what they're capable of," Sully said, his voice low. "But we have to stand together. We don't have a choice." Alisara nodded, her mind still racing with thoughts of strategy. The Kalor were strong, but they were untested against this new threat. The humans, on the other hand, were resourceful and determined, and they had already shown that they could hold their ground in the face of overwhelming odds. Together, they had a chance, but only if they fought as one. "I've sent word to my warriors," Alisara said, her voice calm but commanding. "The Kalor will fight alongside you. We will hold our ground and protect this planet no matter the cost." Sully gave a small smile, the kind that spoke of quiet determination. "We'll make it through this, together." The battle began with a deafening roar as the enemy ships descended, their dark hulls blocking out the sun. The air was filled with the sound of weapons charging, and the ground shook beneath their feet as the Kalor and human forces prepared for what would surely be a battle for their lives. The first shots rang out, laser fire cutting through the sky as both sides clashed. The Kalor moved with precision, their alien weapons flashing as they cut down enemies. The humans fought with equal intensity, their own weapons tearing through the enemy ranks. For the first time in history, the Kalor and humans were fighting side by side, and the sight of it filled Alisara with a strange sense of pride. Sully, leading a small group of human soldiers, fought with a focus that was almost mesmerizing. His rifle never missed its target, and his team followed his lead without question. Alisara watched him for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she observed the way he moved with such confidence and skill. She had always thought of humans as weak, but now she saw them in a different light. They were not weak. They were resilient, adaptable, and willing to do whatever it took to survive. The enemy, however, was unlike anything they had faced before. They were fierce, relentless, and highly organized. The Kalor and humans quickly realized that this was not going to be an easy victory. The new enemy's weapons were unlike anything they had ever seen, cutting through their defenses with frightening precision. Alisara, ever the strategist, realized that they would need more than just brute force to win. They needed a plan. Something clever, something unexpected. Her mind raced as she watched the battlefield unfold before her. "Form a defensive line," she shouted to her warriors. "We need to protect the rear flank. If we don't hold them off, they'll overrun us." Sully, hearing her command, turned to his soldiers. "Move! Get to cover!" "We're not losing this planet today." The battle raged on, and as the Kalor and humans fought together, Alisara felt something stir inside her. It was a feeling she couldn't quite explain. A sense of unity, of purpose. For the first time, she wasn't just fighting for her people, she was fighting for something greater than herself. She was fighting for a future where Kalor and humans could stand together, not as enemies, but as allies. As the battle reached its peak, it became clear that the enemy was not going to back down. The Kalor and human forces, though strong, were being pushed to their limits. Alisara knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would lose everything. She looked to Sully, who was leading his men with the same determination that had kept him going since the beginning. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes were focused, unwavering. He had proven himself time and time again on this battlefield, and now it was his moment. "Alisara!" Sully called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the battle. "We need to make a final push. If we don't take out their main ship, it's over. We're running out of time." Alyssa nodded, her mind already racing with a plan. "I'll give the order. We'll take them down together." With a final, unified effort, the Kalor and human forces launched their attack. The ground shook as they moved forward, laser fire lighting up the sky. The main enemy ship loomed ahead, its weapons firing relentlessly at the approaching forces. But Alyssa and Sully were determined. This battle would not be their last. Together, they led the charge, cutting through the enemy defenses with a fierce, coordinated attack. The Kalor warriors and human soldiers worked in perfect sync, each side covering the other as they pushed forward. Alyssa's heart raced as they neared the enemy ship, knowing that this was their last chance. With a final coordinated strike, the enemy ship exploded in a blinding flash of light. The remaining forces, realizing they had lost, began to retreat. The battle was over. The planet was saved, and for the first time, Alyssa and Sully stood together, victorious. They had done it. Against all odds, the Kalor and humans had fought side by side, and together they had won. Alyssa returned to Sully, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and something else, something she couldn't quite name. "We did it," she said, her voice quiet but filled with pride. Sully gave her a tired smile. "Yeah, we did. Together."